This is the Quiz Fix. I'm Cyril, that's Olivia. One true story per episode, one quiz at the end, because facts you tested on are facts you keep. Here we go. If you want a political drama with subpoenas, secret recordings, and a nation glued to its television sets, the 1973 Senate Watergate hearings deliver. But the wild part is that this was not fiction. It was the US Senate trying to get to the bottom of a break-in, a cover-up, and the possibility that the White House itself was involved.
And the hearings mattered because they turned a messy scandal into a national reckoning. Before that summer, Watergate was still, for many Americans, just the name of a building. Afterward, it became shorthand for abuse of power, deception, and political accountability.
Let's set the scene. In June 1972, 5 men were caught breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. At first glance, it looked like a bungled burglary, but investigations quickly revealed ties to people connected with President Richard Nixon's reelection campaign.
Right, and that campaign was officially called the Committee to Re-elect the President. The nickname that stuck was not flattering: Creep. As journalists and investigators dug deeper, they found campaign operatives had been involved in political spying and sabotage. And then came the bigger question: who knew what, and when did they know it?
That question eventually drew in the Senate. On February 7, 1973, the Senate voted to create the Select Committee on Presidential Campaign Activities. It's a mouthful, so everybody just called it the Senate Watergate Committee.
The committee had 7 members, split between parties, and it was chaired by North Carolina Democrat Sam Ervin. Ervin was a remarkable choice for television age history. He was a constitutional traditionalist, folksy, deeply versed in the law, and he had a way of making complicated issues sound plain without sounding plain-spoken in the sloppy sense.
He also became a national celebrity. Not the kind he wanted, maybe, but there he was, in a suit, bow tie, and southern drawl, explaining constitutional principles to the country. And alongside him was the committee's chief counsel, Samuel Dash, who became central to the day-to-day legal work.
The hearings began on May 17, 1973, in the Senate caucus room. That room had seen major moments before, but this one was different because the proceedings were televised live. Americans weren't just reading about the scandal in the morning paper, they were watching it unfold in real time.
That television coverage is crucial. The hearings became one of the first major political dramas of the TV era. People arranged their schedules around them. Offices had radios and then TVs on. At home, the hearings played like a slow-motion constitutional thriller, except every twist was real and the stakes were enormous.
And the Senate was not just performing theatre. It was gathering testimony that could establish whether criminal conduct reached into the highest levels of government. The committee's job was to examine the extent, if any, of illegal or improper activity in the 1972 campaign and its aftermath.
One of the early breaks came from a witness named James McCord. He was a former CIA officer and one of the Watergate burglars. McCord had already pleaded guilty, but in March 1973, he wrote a letter to Judge John Sirica saying there had been pressure to plead guilty and that perjury and political cover-up were involved.
That letter was a bombshell because it suggested the burglary was only one piece of a much bigger operation. It also signalled that witnesses might start talking. And once people started talking, the Senate hearings shifted from a narrow investigation into something much more serious.
Then came the testimony of John Dean, the former White House counsel. If you were following the hearings, Dean's appearance was the moment the story really changed. He testified that there had been a cover-up and that the White House had discussed paying hush money and managing the public narrative.
Dean was not an outside observer. He had been inside the administration, close to the decisions and conversations. So when he said there was a cover-up, it carried major weight. He also described discussions involving President Nixon and top aides about how to handle the scandal.
His testimony was lengthy and careful because he was walking a legal tightrope. But the basic effect was dramatic. The hearings were no longer just about whether a burglary had happened. They were now about whether the presidency had participated in obstruction of justice.
And that's the constitutional heart of it. A burglary can be prosecuted as a crime. A cover-up involving the executive branch raises questions about abuse of power, accountability, and whether institutions can check a president when the presidency itself is implicated.
The hearings kept building through the spring and summer. Several former administration officials and campaign figures testified. There were denials, evasions, and carefully phrased answers. But each week, more pieces fell into place.
One of the most famous parts of the whole story was the revelation of the White House taping system. The existence of secret recordings in the Oval Office and elsewhere became public during the hearings, though the full significance of the tapes would come later.
That was a jaw-dropper, because once you know there are recordings, the dispute changes. It's no longer just one person's word against another's. It becomes a question of evidence that can confirm, deny, or complicate testimony.
Exactly. And the hearings also showed the value of persistence in congressional oversight. The committee could not force the whole truth out of people overnight, but through public testimony, pressure, immunity deals, and the sheer visibility of the proceedings, the investigation kept advancing.
Speaking of immunity, the hearings featured testimony from other key figures, including former White House aides and campaign operatives. Some invoked the Fifth Amendment. Others tried to minimize their roles. The committee's job was partly to sort out honest memory from strategic forgetting.
And that's always a challenge in hearings like this. People have incentives to protect themselves, protect colleagues, or protect a larger institution. The Senate committee had to cross-check testimony, compare timelines, and work with documents whenever possible.
The public followed all of this with remarkable intensity. According to contemporary accounts, the hearings drew huge television audiences. They became part civic lesson, part suspense story, and part national anxiety test.
And the personalities mattered. Sam Ervin's folksiness made the process feel accessible. Republican Minority Counsel Fred Thompson, who would later become a senator himself, also gained attention for his role in the proceedings. The hearings were bipartisan in structure, even if the political fallout was not evenly shared.
It's worth remembering that the committee's work happened alongside journalism that was also crucial. The Washington Post, especially reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, had already been chasing the story. Congressional hearings and investigative reporting reinforced each other.
That interplay is a big reason Watergate is so famous. The press uncovered leads, the Senate applied institutional pressure, the Justice Department pursued criminal probes, and the whole thing became a multi-front investigation into misconduct at the top of government.
As the summer went on, one of the most important practical issues was whether there were tapes of presidential conversations that could prove what had been said about the cover-up. At this stage, the hearings helped move the public from suspicion to expectation. Something concrete had to exist, or the contradictions were going to keep multiplying.
And there was also a broader civic impact. Many Americans were seeing congressional oversight not as an abstract constitutional mechanism, but as a live process that could reveal truth. That was powerful, especially in the aftermath of Vietnam and other trust-shaking events.
The hearings also demonstrated that constitutional government can be slow and messy, but still effective. Nothing about this was neat. Witnesses contradicted themselves. Lawyers argued over privileges. Senators asked long, sometimes repetitive questions. But the process kept grinding forward.
And the result was that the committee helped lay the groundwork for the larger Watergate scandal's collapse. The Senate hearings did not by themselves bring down the presidency, but they amplified the evidence, widened public scrutiny, and made denial much harder.
One striking thing about the hearings is how much of them was procedural. Subpoenas, motions, witness lists, immunity arrangements, and documentary evidence may sound boring on paper. In reality, those tools are how democratic systems expose wrongdoing.
That's a great point. Accountability often looks unglamorous while it's happening. It's not usually one dramatic speech that changes everything. It's a pile of records, testimony, and corroboration that finally makes the truth too heavy to ignore.
By the time the Senate committee wrapped up in the summer of 1973, the scandal had outgrown the original burglary story. The hearings had shown that Watergate was not just about a crime at a campaign office. It was about a system of political intelligence, deception, and cover-up reaching toward the Oval Office.
And after the hearings, the story kept moving. The special prosecutor, Archibald Cox, continued pressing for the tapes. Public confidence eroded. The House Judiciary Committee later took up impeachment inquiries. So the Senate hearings were a major chapter, but not the last one.
If you step back, the hearings are a reminder of why checks and balances matter. Congress investigated the executive branch. Reporters pursued leads. Courts handled evidence. No single institution solved Watergate alone, but each one mattered.
And Sam Ervin, for all his old-school style, became a symbol of that institutional seriousness. He was not there for drama. He was there because the Constitution gave Congress the power and responsibility to investigate when the public interest demanded it.
There's also a lesson in how public trust works. Once a government starts sounding evasive, every new explanation is measured against the last one. The Senate hearings exposed how damaging inconsistency can be when the stakes are this high.
And they showed that television can magnify accountability. People saw senators asking questions, saw witnesses sweating under the lights, and saw the machinery of democracy at work. That visibility mattered as much as the legal findings.
So if someone asks why the 1973 Watergate hearings still matter, the answer is simple. They were a turning point in American political history. They made a cover-up visible, turned congressional oversight into must-see national drama, and helped reveal the scale of misconduct behind Watergate.
And they left behind a lasting idea. In a constitutional system, the truth can be slow, but it is not invisible forever. Sometimes it takes hearings, documents, and a very patient Senate committee, but eventually the facts have a way of making their entrance.
Today's episode is sponsored by Fyrebox. That's Fyrebox. Fyrebox is the no-code quiz platform trusted by marketers, teachers, and creators around the world. Whether you want to capture leads, run an assessment, or just engage your audience with something more interesting than a contact form, Fyrebox makes it easy. Start free at fyrebox.com. Welcome back. You just heard the story. Now let's see what stuck. Coming up, a few quick questions straight from what we just covered. 4 options each. I'll give you a few seconds to think before each answer. Ready? Here we go. Question 1. What was the official name of the Senate committee created on February 7, 1973 to investigate Watergate? A. The Senate Watergate Committee. B. The Select Committee on Presidential Campaign Activities. C. The Committee to Re-elect the President. D. The House Judiciary Committee. The correct answer is B. The Select Committee on Presidential Campaign Activities. Question 2. Who chaired the Senate Watergate hearings? A. Archibald Cox. B. John Dean. C. Sam Ervin. D. Fred Thompson. The correct answer is C. Sam Ervin. Question 3. On what date did the televised Senate Watergate hearings begin? A. February 7, 1973. B. March 1973. C. May 17, 1973. D. Summer 1974. The correct answer is C. May 17, 1973. Question 4. What was one major significance of John Dean's testimony? A. He said the burglary never happened. B. He testified that there had been a cover-up in the White House. C. He revealed he had organized the break-in alone. D. He announced that the hearings would be closed to the public. The correct answer is B. He testified that there had been a cover-up in the White House. Question 5. Why was the revelation of the White House taping system so important during the hearings? A. It meant the scandal involved only campaign volunteers. B. It turned the dispute into one that could be checked against recorded evidence. C. It ended all testimony immediately. D. It showed that the hearings were being broadcast only on radio. The correct answer is B. It turned the dispute into one that could be checked against recorded evidence. That's a wrap on this one. Thanks for sticking with us all the way through, quiz and all. If you liked it, hit subscribe so the next episode lands automatically. I'm Cyril. This was The Quiz Fix, and we'll be back soon with another true story worth knowing.